There have been claims that the current Attorney General has been soft on Wall Street, that he has negotiated settlements rather than pursue prosecution. How would you protect taxpayers from another Wall Street meltdown? Let's just take that question by itself. Mr. Brodsky.
Again, the specific remedy I propose is a bill that I authored about 5 years ago, which is carried in the Senate by Senator Schneiderman, which would take the Morton Act, which is the bill that the state law used to control excesses on Wall Street, the one Elliott used so successfully, and expand the ability of plaintiffs to come and be protected. Right now, for example, if you are a private citizen and Bernie Madoff rips you off, you can recover. But if you're a pension fund and you treat it the same way, you can't. Now, part of the way you discipline Wall Street is by making sure that the laws are understood by malefactors so to be available, so that the laws are available to go into the pocketbook of the next group of wrongdoers. If those folks understand that by expanding the Morton Act, they will have a higher degree of vulnerability to monetary punishment, they're going to be less likely to do it. But in the end, there isn't anybody here who isn't going to stand up, and I say probably with equal validity, and say, I'm going to be tough on the bad guys. Toughness has its place. But intelligence, reform of the laws, an ability to work with people with whom you do not agree, and an ability to lead the process of change, not merely critique it, is what, again, I suggest you do, is the distinguishing qualities of the candidacy I offer. It is about the Martin Act. It is about litigation and standing up for Wall Street. It is also about creating a political climate in which these kinds of changes can be made, as I have done repeatedly.
Mr. Donallo?
I think the next Attorney General is going to have to be a continual backstop on what is going on in Washington. I think that financial reform is going to fall short, it's going to be inadequate, and the AG's office is going to be there to make sure that there is adequate transparency, a lack of conflicts of interest, and appropriate capital behind financial services commitments and the businesses that they do. When I was at the Attorney General's office, I did the cases that the Assemblyman is talking about. I was the person who brought the cases against Wall Street and helped transform that office into the Sheriff of Wall Street and a great, great protector of investors returning billions of dollars. And I'm the only person here who can talk about standing up to Wall Street and the insurance companies as a public official. I testified in front of Congress 10 times on financial services, so I have a very good understanding and instinct about what it's going to take to make sure that what comes out of Washington does not result in another financial crisis and does not permit the companies to cheat the public again. And I do believe that it revolves around simple issues around transparency, conflicts of interest, and selling products where you have adequate capital. The Martin Act is an extremely strong tool. I was the one who dusted it off and reintroduced it for Elliott Spitzer in the AG's office against Wall Street, and I will continue to use it if Wall Street steps out of line again. Thank you.
Ms. Rice?
You know, when I stood up to, everyone hear me? Sorry, Mr. Brodsky turned it off, trying to trick on me. Guess he doesn't want people to hear what I have to say. When I first stood up, I talked very clearly about two of the things that I believe are the main issues that the next Attorney General is going to have to deal with. It's Wall Street and it's Albany. And there are similarities in both. What are the similarities? There's no accountability and there's no transparency. Wall Street people took advantage of investors and everyone else, and guess what happened? The government bailed them out. Right? That's what happened. Our tax dollars bailed them out. Every single person up here is going to say, I'm going to be tough on Wall Street. I'm going to be tough on Wall Street. And all of us probably will. But the bottom line is when you're talking about reforming Wall Street and Albany, you can't be a Wall Street insider or an Albany insider to do that. We have seen what has happened. When we've had Wall Street insiders who know all the terms and everything that goes on there trying to reform Wall Street, it doesn't work. And we've seen what people up in Albany saying, well, I can do this, I'm gonna make all these changes. It doesn't work. You need an outsider, someone who's been an advocate for their entire career, like I have, a real outsider. I've never been on Wall Street. I'm not a career Albany politician. You can't reform the system if you are a part of the problem. When the system is broken, the people who are helping break it are not part of the solution. And this is the tough talk that we have to hear. This is what we all want. This is what we all need. Whether we're an investor, we're a voter, we are a regular person on the street, we want to know that every time we turn around, the people who are supposed to be taking care of us are not taking advantage of us. That's the bottom line.
Thank you. Mr. Coffey?
Well, I think we all agree that the next AG is going to have a very, very active role with regard to Wall Street. And to be an effective role, you have to understand Wall Street. It's complicated. If you're going to be the cop on that beat, you ought to know the beat. You ought to know the neighborhood. You ought to know where the bodies are buried, and you ought to know their tricks. I know those tricks. And the notion that anyone would group me in with folks who are Wall Street insiders is nutty. I have fought those guys for 11 years. Bloomberg Markets Magazine designated me as Wall Street's new nemesis. Now, Wall Street's important. It pays a lot of the rent, and we got to keep it growing. It's an important industry. But in my view, the best way to keep it growing is to keep it honest. And I'm not talking about what I'm going to do. I can talk to you about what I've done. Right? I've recovered over $10 billion for defrauded investors, large and small. I've made people pay personally for the first time in history, as I said before. Bernie Ebbers, the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of WorldCom, I took everything he had except the furniture and the silverware and got it for the investors, including his $5 million joint tax refund. We heard about that, so that comes over too. So we need somebody who understands Wall Street and is going to go after them. And I'm going to do two things specifically. Number one, as AG, I'm going to make the bad people pay. When companies do bad things, they get punished, but somebody at that company did the bad thing. And I'm going to go after that person, because if I make that person pay, and everyone else on Wall Street knows that's what happened, they're going to behave themselves better. So I'm going to go after people, making people pay. Those CEOs, those directors, and I've done it. I'm not talking about what I'd like to do. I have done it. And if I had the AG subpoena power, I could do it a lot better. Second thing, I'm going to go after these third parties, the credit rating agencies, the audit firms, the lawyers, the bankers, the people who you trust when they say, you know, this thing is fine, you can trust it. You can buy this CDO. By the way, I know the difference between a CDO and a CDS. There's a lot of initials there on Wall Street, you need to know them. I'm going to go after those folks and make sure that they're doing their job. It is not a job for a rookie. We've been blessed with 12 years of very, very good attorneys general who knew Wall Street and went after it. I'm ready on day one to be that same attorney general. Thank you.
Mr. Schneiderman?
Look, the financial services, and I agree with a lot of what Sean Coffey just said. Look, I spent years also as I became a partner at a big law firm and had a similar sort of epiphany that it just wasn't satisfying enough, and instead of switching sides to become a plaintiff's lawyer, I decided, without knowing a hell of a lot about what was going on in Albany, to run for the state senate. And let me also mention that after having spent 10 years and being the only senator in history that the Bruno gang refused to pass one of my bills, I also would reject the title of Albany Insider. Look, financial services regulations are being rewritten in Washington. Our predecessors in a great progressive era in the 1930s rewrote the laws after the Great Depression and came up with a system that stopped us from having market crashes, which happened every 20 or 30 years, back since Isaac Newton lost all his money in the South Seas bubble. And for the one period in history, 1929 and 1987, we did not have crashes because of the work those courageous legislators, the government did, right, in the Roosevelt era. The problem we got is in the 1980s, the Reaganites started to undo the regulations, and then it just kept going. And, Bill Clinton undid more of the regulations, and George Bush just, undid everything that was left. So we're back to this pattern of crashes. Once the feds are done rewriting the rules, and I do not believe our current federal government's going to do as thorough a job as the folks did in the 30s. I don't think the political will is there. We do have a shot at the state level to supplement it. Now, everyone's talked about the Martin Act, and I agree with Assemblyman Brodsky that we should pass the Brodsky-Schneiderman Act, and I hope everyone will come around to supporting it.